Here coming out. Okay, give me 1 second while we pull up the other one. Everybody coming in here saying hello, hello, and we are live. All right, good morning, happy Monday, happy post draft miss to everybody. Had to put that Christmas draft miss sweater away. Scott, how you doing? Did you get some rest yesterday?
No, yesterday was busy. So today it's I call this nap in a cup, It's like when
Yeah.
you need a little pick me up, you could either take a nap or, get a nap in a cup.
I feel that. We've been in the process of moving, so did a lot of unpacking yesterday. But sun was out. It was a good day. Kind of reflecting on the Broncos draft and the draft as a whole. Another season or another draft season come and gone. But excited to recap it now. Things have started to kind of set in place. Things making sense. How do all these pieces work out? But welcome in everybody that is joining us right now. This is Broncos for Breakfast. I am Nick Kendell along with Scott Kennedy. You guys can find us on Twitter at Nick Kendell MHH and Scott Kennedy at Scout Kennedy. Also, guys, if you can, please head on over to Scott's channel, YouTube channel, where he has a bunch of stuff about the guys we're going to be talking about. If you have any specific players, he has Quinn Miners on there. He has Baron Browning. He has Jonathan Cooper, et cetera, et cetera. So go to youtube.com/C/Scott Kennedy. Scott, man, great draft weekend. A lot of fun. I'm happy to be here again on a Monday. My eyes are a little sore from being on the screen and staring at screen so much. We streamed about 17 hours Thursday through Saturday. My God, but I'm alive. I'm happy. I'm raring to go. I got my energy in a thermos as well. So, man, good job, man. I'm happy to be here. We did it. We did it.
Yeah,
Job
it's
well
like
done.
the game day yet? Now what? And that's why I said this is what baseball's for. People are like, baseball's boring. I'm like, it's not called America's most exciting sport. It's called America's pastime.
Yeah.
So we have baseball to kill time until August. That's what baseball's for. But when you're fans like we are, and interested like we are, football's NFL, college football's 12 months a year. So
yes,
on to the OTAs, and then camp is right around the corner. Blink twice, and it'll be, we'll have Hall of Fame game.
Yeah, man, that's gosh, I really hope it's fun to have the Broncos in the Hall of Fame game, but having to watch an extra preseason game, I'd be okay if the Broncos didn't have to play that again. I think actually they played the Falcons. If you remember that game, that was a little bit, man. I mean, it's football, so I'm gonna watch it, but goodness, sometimes those are not as clean to watch. So we got Pobby coming in here this morning on this fine Monday morning over on YouTube, dropping the so generous $50 super chat out of the gate, starting my week off just right. Cup of coffee and Pobby with the super. Thanks, guys, for the great podcast as always. I really appreciate this early morning show. Hi to cute and adorable Summit. Go Broncos. Well, Pobby, you're going to have to give a shout out to Scott's pets as well. They're going to get a little jealous. Their ears are going to be ringing here pretty soon.
It was birthdays time, actually. I had two cats turning. I think my dog turns 8 this week. So it's a lot of May birthdays for the varmints in my house.
Man, awesome. Well, congrats to them. 8 years old. What kind of breed is he? Or she?
He's a Shepherd mix. So he looks mostly German Shepherd, but he's got the colors of a black collie. So he's got white socks, white chest with the brown in it. So it kind of, if you took a Burmese mountain dog and stretched him out, that's kind of what he looks like. So,
oh man,
but
don't say that too loud.
But the Shepherd mix, I'll say this and I'll quit talking animals. The Shepherd mixes are great, just because Shepherds are so smart. But then you put some mutt in them, and it takes away some of the health problems, that you might run into with a full blood Shepherd. But I've had 2 of them the last 20 years, and they're great dogs.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pobby, thank you for the super. We really appreciate that. Getting back to that, just talking to the animals for Pobby because she likes that. Jason O'Neill coming in here with the comment over on YouTube. Good morning, Jason. How can experts say Denver was a big loser by not drafting quarterback? I'm a big proponent of shutting out the noise and not allowing one person's opinion to dictate my future, and neither should the Broncos. Continued. I feel that no matter what Denver does, it's not good enough. And just because Denver didn't address quarterback in the draft doesn't mean they're an automatic loser. They addressed a lot of needs. So, Jason, you're absolutely right. The thing is about the draft, you're going to have more needs in areas that you want to address than picks in the range that you have. And in quarterback, we've seen it. We've talked about it on the show. If you don't take one in the first round, you're really talking about buying like a penny stock. So the Broncos didn't think highly enough about Kellen Mond, Davis Mills, Kyle Trask, and obviously nobody thought highly enough about Jamie Newman going completely undrafted. But that's the way it breaks sometimes. So
if you watched our show, you'd know that's not a surprise.
No, absolutely.
Jamie Newman looked so out of place at the Senior Bowl, and I was like, Felipe Franks didn't look good, and Jamie Newman looked worse, and neither of them got drafted. Felipe Franks got picked up as a undrafted free agent. I'm assuming Jamie Newman did, but I didn't see where he got picked up. But I wasn't surprised at all that Jamie Newman didn't get picked up. He was out of place. He really was out of place. I want to hit on Jason's comment real quick, just about the big loser. Now, I'm of the opinion the only way the draft is about projecting. So you really can't be a big loser. Surtain turns into Champ Bailey. How are you a loser here?
Yeah.
If Justin Fields turns into Joe Montana, then you got questions, but not yet. So as I've said before, let me at least be wrong before you tell me I'm wrong. However, there is one scenario where I think you can be a winner or loser in this, and that's how you accumulate or spend your draft capital. So, I'll go back a ways to when Mike Ditka was willing to give up his entire draft and another first-round pick to get Ricky Williams. Okay, whatever. But Indianapolis Colts took Edgerrin James before Ricky Williams. The evaluation was good. Edgerrin James ended up being the better pro. So good job, scouting department in Indianapolis Colts. But their general manager came out of that a loser, in my opinion, because they could have picked up 3 or 4 extra high picks and gotten Edgerrin James. So to me, when you're afraid to make the deal, that's really where you can come out a winner or loser. Not necessarily players here or there. Nick and I will tell you what we think, but that doesn't mean we're right. We might end up being right, and we can revisit that. Surtain, we really wanted Surtain, and he would have been available at 18. Mike, could they have picked up a couple extra picks? Not going to knock the pick. I just knock on the fact that they might have been able to get it a little bit later and picked up a few extra picks. So that's my opinion on that. I'm not calling anybody a loser for whatever player they pick. Could they have gotten a little more out of that spot?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we don't have all the facts too. We don't have every single bit of information that these teams do about these players that influence their drafts, what they're going for, et cetera. So Mike Silver did have a piece that came out right before we went live here. We were reading it, and the Broncos did have 3 different teams call about the number 9 overall pick. I can't speak to who all those players were or all those teams were. I know the Chicago Bears were in contacts with the Broncos to come up to 9, and they did not get enough. I would have been, quite honestly, I'd have been okay, pretty happy with the trade back that the Giants got. Maybe even plus another 2022 day 2 pick to move up those 2 extra spots. But the Broncos like Patrick Surtain.
Not about the 4 spot. I'm like, you throw in another 2, and I'd be willing to come out of 4 for a first and 2 seconds to go back to 20 based on the needs that a specific team has.
Yep, absolutely. And also, you heard me talk about it before. The Broncos didn't get a quarterback in this draft. That's true, and I'm fine with bypassing the quarterback, but I don't feel like they position themselves in the future to go get a quarterback as well, right? Like that's what the trading back would do for me. You'd have that extra capital, then you have the ability to be flexible. You can't afford to give up those picks. I will say, though, with how the Broncos attacked this draft, addressing a bunch of future needs, now you can be a little bit more flexible and sacrifice those future picks because you're not going to have as many holes to fill out. So obviously attacking the secondary, et cetera, et cetera.
And this draft's going to be graded on 2 things. How good is Patrick Surtain and how good is Justin Fields? Mm-hmm. That's how it's going to be. That's how, in a lot of play, it's not just the Broncos that are going to be graded that way. It's because Fields thought could be a top 3 pick. There's a lot of thoughts there. And frankly, if Trey Lance doesn't end up being a superstar, nobody's gonna mention the fact that 8 other teams passed on him. Everybody's gonna hate on San Francisco.
Yeah.
So that's where all the eyeballs are gonna be for sure.
100%. We got Ron Arter coming in here saying Peyton was awesome. He didn't let public opinion or option run this draft. I love that the media is mostly crap out there. It's great he did his own thing. Broncos for life. Well, Ron, I think since you're joining us today, I don't think you're saying this media is crap, but we appreciate it. And, that's true. A lot of teams and a lot of general stuff, they don't really have the specific inside knowledge, or, they just don't have enough time to have that level of knowledge about each and every team to the depth that Scott and I do on here. That's why we're covering this team specifically. Now, we will venture out to some Falcons, some general stuff or general NFL stuff, but you're right. And the Broncos, a lot of people, they view that on how good they viewed Justin Fields, how they view Drew Lock, the chance to bring in a quarterback in the future in a 2022 class that could be good. Right now, it doesn't look as good, but things change. So we'll see. But it's all going to come out in the wash, right? Like there's no grading drafts right after they're done is a fun process, but it's futile, right? Like we don't know what it's going to be. A lot of it depends on development, where these guys landed, et cetera, et cetera. So we're fixing to find out, but we won't know for a bit.
Yeah, I agree. It's a hindsight thing, and the only way I'm going to worry about somebody is if you should have made a move to come out of a spot. If you're reaching for a guy that was probably going to be available, but otherwise, you've heard me say it before. You got to trust your evaluations. You know your team. You got to trust your evaluations, and there is so much more information out there that doesn't come out publicly that we don't know why some of these things happen. The safety from TCU. I have to actually look his name up. I forget his name. But
Trevon Moehrig.
Merrig, I think they pronounced it Merrig.
Yes.
He had a back problem. He ended up being. I thought the Falcons might go after him, but he had a back problem that affected his pro day. That was out there, but we don't know how serious that is.
Mm-hmm.
So a guy like that falls. Well, why did he fall? That's why.
Yep.
Ojulari. We talked about him a lot. This is a guy I thought was going to go in the first round. So there's stuff out there that isn't public, and trying to say that you know it all, that's a pretty good way to say that guy's an idiot.
Yeah. Never be too overconfident in your own draft evaluation, because you will be proven wrong as often as you will be proven right. We got the pooping hippo coming in here over on YouTube. Oh man, it makes me think of Ace Ventura. Offensive tackle is a need. I agree. Talking about it earlier on the chat, but it looks better than it has in a few years. I'm just looking at the process. Stuff could always be better at the end of the day, or at the end of a rebuild. Thank goodness. And pooping hippo, I'm going to touch on this real quick. There's 31 other teams out there that if impact your draft plans, right? Like you have a guy that you have your eyes on, and then next thing you know, he's off the board. And the Broncos were pretty good knowledge here from a pretty good source that the Broncos were sniped on 3 separate offensive tackles. They had 3 different ones that they were like, okay, if this guy's there, I think this is going to be the pick. And they were taken right before. One of them in the 3rd round, Brady Christensen. The Broncos then trade back to get Quinn Miners and Baron Browning. With that Quinn Miners pick as well, the Broncos were eyeing Spencer Brown, the Scott's guy, in the end of the 3rd round, and he ended up going to the Bills. The Bills also sniped the Broncos in the 5th round with Tommy Boyle. So Broncos were looking at offensive tackle, but you got to be able to pivot. You got to be flexible, because you don't know what's going to happen when the bullets are flying, and you don't want to be caught there with your pants around your ankles. Kind of like what I think maybe even happened to the Cowboys at pick number 10, trading back with the Eagles. 2 spots, didn't get a really good return. I think they thought they were going to get Horn or Surtain. Didn't work out. They ended up taking Parsons there. And gosh, are they running an all linebacker defense there in Dallas? What's going on?
Well, and I have a phrase that drives when I'm working with people, that drives type A's crazy, which is you can't spend too much time planning, because plans change. You got to be willing to adopt, and it's never more true. I mean, it was funny watching the draft. It seemed like most of the trades started happening when they had the least amount of time on the clock. The 3rd round started going crazy. I'm like, these guys have to sound like auctioneers,
yep.
Or they're on Wall Street trying to buy stocks. And it's when you've got all this time. In the 1st round, it all seems to go pretty much as planned. They've been doing all this stuff, and they use all 10 minutes to do it. It's like, come on, you guys know what you want. You're not making any trades. But then the 3rd round comes, and there's trades all over the place. I'm like, man, how's that stuff getting done in that type of window? So, I saw a headline that it's just, these are the type of headlines that just make me shake my head. It's like, will what the 49ers do at 3 affect what the Falcons do at 4?
It's that time of year.
Yeah, it will. They won't be able to take the guy that they take at 3. Yeah. Come on now. Let's hit up Chris. Let's do you want to start at the top and start hitting on some of these guys now?
Sure.
Chris,
I want to get to this one.
I'm sorry if I butchered your name. But he says, does Miners have any tackle possibilities? He has a wingspan for it. I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
Just because I think he's straight guard. He does have an 82, and that's just insane. He's got almost a 7-foot wingspan at just over 6'3".
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's like I'm tying my shoes without bending my back. I mean, so I think he's straight guard. I think he was actually a little bit heavy at the Senior Bowl. He came in at 320, and I think he'll be able to slim down a little bit, but he doesn't have to. The way he moves, that I think he's guard, but he actually played some center. So he played some center at Senior Bowl and looked just fine. So if you were going to move him around a little bit, I think it's definitely across the interior line.
And it does sound like the Broncos' plans starting out are for him to compete at center with Lloyd Cushenberry. Obviously, you've seen both those guys at the Senior Bowl the last few years. But last year, Lloyd Cushenberry, rookie season, but he really struggled. He made it so the offensive line for run blocking was struggling. I know that him and Drew Lock had some issues with some coverages, identifying the mic, et cetera, setting protections. But I think this is a shot being thrown at Lloyd Cushenberry, who I think deserves benefit of the doubt for his rookie year. But if you're in a position to strengthen his strength and add competition to that room, especially along the offensive line, that's not a bad process at all. Get the best 5 guys out there. And Miners really helps that. He also helps bring a mean mentality. I know some people will say that the tone setting from the offensive line can be a little bit overrated. Like, are they executing? Are they doing their job? That's what matters. But Miners brings a little bit of mentality as well.
And coming from someplace like Wisconsin Whitewater, which I'd never heard of. I heard of Quinn Miners before I heard of Wisconsin Whitewater. Then you've got a chip on your shoulder anyway. He's got more to prove than anybody else. He's coming in. I mean, look at the other parts of this rookie class for the most part. The next smallest school I think is Indiana. Everything else is Tech, LSU, Ohio State, Auburn, Wisconsin Whitewater. He's gonna walk into that rookie draft class and be like, everybody's gonna be like, who the hell are you? You're from where? So he's gonna have a little chip on his shoulder, and he played that way at the Senior Bowl. He was fine. And we mentioned that when we first started doing the show, I said the interior line prospects from the non-Power 5 schools are really, really good in this class. And you got one of them. I really like the pick. Nick, just looking at it, though, if we're going to look at in hindsight, who are 2 guys that were available that I think could have been in that spot to look at? I liked Ambry Thomas a lot. Was picked just a few spots after him, and then Melifonwu. So I know, based on what happened later in the draft, that the Broncos were looking at defensive backs.
Yeah,
and early. So lots of defensive backs. So 2 guys I want y'all to keep an eye on their career span and compare and contrast and say, okay, these are guys that we could have had. And I would have picked, because I'm not going to go back in hindsight and pick the best guy out of the next 10. I'm going to tell you right now, the 2 guys that I would have considered in that spot also for the Denver Broncos were Ambry Thomas and Melifonwu, a defensive back. So let's see how they end up doing.
Yeah, and with Melifonwu, he's a good player, athlete. Obviously, I thought he was best in a cover 3. There was some character murmurs with him about some issues with listening to what co-eds wished, I guess, at Syracuse. So that's something you want to watch out for there. But we'll see how it plays out there. And we got a Periscope comment in here coming from Martin. So, Martin, good morning to you over on Periscope. Good to see you. Hey, Nick and Scott. What are the chances that Kerry Vincent takes Bryce Callahan's spot on this roster? Well, thank you very much for the comment, Martin. I think this is actually the Broncos invested so much in defensive back this offseason that there's going to have to be some tough conversations about the defensive back room in general. I think that you're going to see Essang Bassey, who Peyton said was still coming back from injury. I think there's a good chance that he's still going to be somewhat dinged up by the time August rolls around, and you could see him get that IR for the entire season kind of route just so they can stash him, make sure he's fully healthy, get that extra year of control also. So I think that's very much a possibility for Essang Bassey, talking about the slot guys. And then really you're going to have a tough question here between Bryce Callahan and Michael Ojemudia. I've had a few back and forth yesterday about this. Bryce Callahan's obviously the better player right now, but he's going to be 30 years old. You could save $8 million moving on from him. And also he just 1 year left of control, and the injury history he has. I mean, he hasn't played a full season in years. So I think there's very much a possibility you could see Bryce Callahan moved off this roster before the start of the season. And it's not really Bryce Callahan's fault. It's just because how everything lines up, the money you can save. And if your choice is between him or Michael Ojemudia, who is just 23 years old, 3 years left of control, an ascending player, I think that's probably the long-term view here. Even though Callahan is good, you might be able to get some day 3 2022 capital for him. But that's just how the math works out, right? You're only keeping 5 or 6 corners.
And I think Kerry Vincent was taken for one reason, just flat out speed. And, if you're going to miss on a guy that's running a sub 4.4. But it worries me that he opted out for the year and then comes in and only hits 8 reps of 185, which, it's like, well, he's a corner. How much does he need to bench? Yeah, but 8 reps of 185 for a professional football player is bad. I'm pushing 50 and I can still do 8 reps of 185. That's like doing push-ups for somebody my size. That's a little scary. You wonder, it's like, well, what have you been doing the last year? You can tell what Micah Parsons has been doing the last year. He should have come in just in peak condition. So I think the opting out may have hurt him. Basically his explosion numbers weren't great. A 35-inch vertical, 9'9" broad jump, but he went out there and ran a 4.4, a 4.36. So call it a 4.40. He's on there for speed. Now it's going to be up to him. So I don't want to say long shot to make the roster, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's not on the roster come when they knock it down to 53, 54, however many it is now.
Yeah, 55, I think, maybe. I don't know. They just keep switching it around. It's hard to keep. 53 is so ingrained in my head. But, I definitely agree with you. Kerry Vincent's a good player. He's a dog. I really enjoy watching his tape as well. He's definitely somebody, while Surtain isn't one who likes to talk trash, that's not true for Kerry Vincent. He is somebody who he'll be in the guy's face. So I appreciate that. A good bit about him. I mean, in a nickel cornerback, I think there's a market deficiency on the slot cornerback position in general. So if you can get a starting slot corner in the 7th round, I mean, that's gold. So I would say he is the eventual slot replacement. I want to pivot here since we don't have any supers right now to dictate this. Talking about Surtain, we talked about it a little bit earlier. What do you think about his fit on this defense? I mean, the Broncos already invested heavily in cornerback this offseason, bringing in Kyle Fuller, Ronald Darby. Bryce Callahan was really good last year when healthy. And then they get Surtain. So he's kind of an interesting one. I'm really wrapping my head around his 2022 fit. Long term, I think boundary, if you're playing 2 deep safeties, I don't really want him in a cover 1, especially an off coverage cover 1. But with you have 2 deep safeties behind him, he can be physical, he can be long. That's great. But I plug him into mock draftable and look at his most likely or his highest related player comparison, athletic comparison. It's Derwin James. So I'm curious about Surtain kind of being a little bit of a chess piece on this defense, which you need with the likes of Travis Kelce and Darren Waller.
Well, I think you can use him in so many different ways, and because he's good enough in coverage that you can put him on a guy and say, okay, we'll be okay there. He might not be the, a Deion Sanders that's gonna, I've used this joke before. Deion Sanders walked into like the Dallas Cowboys room and they're going through all these three. He goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he walked up to the board and he circled the X receiver and says, that's my guy. Okay, I'm gonna go run some laps or something, forget it. He's not that guy, but he's not bad in coverage. He's still really good in coverage. Yeah. And he's physical like a safety. So you can move him around basically to 5 different spots in a nickel package. He's got football instincts. He grew up eating football for breakfast. Maybe not Broncos for breakfast, but we'll get him there. But he grew up, eating football for breakfast like his Wheaties. He's plenty fast, strong, physical. I want him as the one that keeps in front of you. Where you knock out the screens, the bubble screens, the slip screens, the inside, the jet sweeps, all that kind of stuff. You're taking care of that with him on your side. So you can find a place for him. And as we talked about several times, as we had this discussion at the very beginning, he doesn't necessarily fit this offense or defense perfectly. I'm like, yeah, but general managers are going to draft him for the next decade. And I really thought, for what I like in a corner, that he was the best corner on the board.
Yeah, I know the Falcons had eyes on him. There was some linking him at pick 4 as well early on in the draft process. I think it was more so the Falcons putting in work on him in case they did have a potential trade back.
Yeah,
he was there.
Yeah, for me, if the Falcons came back and got another first rounder out of it, then he made perfect sense, because they've got a good young corner, but they've only got one. And the defensive backfield looks scary.
Yeah. So
picking up another corner, they would have loved to do that, but they ended up going with another receiver instead and staying in that 4 spot. But if they came back, and some of the comments in here was like, the Cowboys, there were a lot of people that wanted Surtain, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He's an elite player. So,
yes.
How can you go wrong with an elite corner on your team?
And we got Tommy Simmers saying Julio to LA. I don't know if that's true. We'll have to check the Twitter machine to see if anything happened here. Tommy, if you're joking to us, I'm going to be upset because that's don't mess with Scott's heart, man. We're going to have to find out about that one. Go ahead, Scott.
No, it's okay. I said this team isn't the Falcons aren't one player away from competing.
Yeah,
they're not. And if they can, there isn't a Falcons fan, they'll be upset if he's joking. But if Julio were to leave, it would be a thank you. We'll see you in a few years when you come back and retire as a Falcon. We put your name up there and you're in the Hall of Fame. he's just been the ultimate pro.
Yeah. And we got Alex coming in here saying, doesn't matter how many weapons you have on offense if your quarterback's always running for his life and can't get the ball to the weapon.
Are you sure this isn't Falcons for breakfast?
Yeah.
I've been saying this for 3 months, Alex, with the Falcons taking another receiver. It's like, oh, who are you going to double team? The defensive end, I hope, because he's the one that's putting Matt Ryan on his ass. So, it doesn't matter. Best pass defense in the world is a quarterback under duress. You and me, I'm right there with you, man.
Yep, absolutely. I do want to kind of touch on Surtain and this making sense for the Broncos a bit. And obviously there was some linking them to Jalen Phillips. We talked about that before the show. He was the number 1 overall recruit in football, I think, his year he came out, but he had 3 or 4 concussions at UCLA that caused him to transfer to Miami. So that would have been fun as well if they could have got him. They also heard they were interested in Jamin Davis. Both those guys, it went 18 and 19. So if the Broncos did trade back to 20 with the Bears, those 2 guys, which likely would have been their target, were not available. So, is what it is. The one I want to get to, though, is, Scott, can you tell me who the one team is in football over the last 4 seasons that has been top 5 in DVOA? We always say defense is fragile. It fluctuates a lot, but there has been one team that has been consistently good on the defensive side of the football the last 4 seasons.
I can't tell you.
The Baltimore Ravens.
I always think Ravens. When
Yes.
I think defense, I think Ravens. Ravens and Steelers. I actually worry for the health of the players when the Ravens and Steelers play each other. I'm like, this is brutal. I mean, it's a little scary watching those teams play against each other. I'm like, I fear for the players' safety. So, and I don't know if we'll have time, but I wanted to talk about some of the drafts that I liked that weren't, who are some of the other teams whose drafts you like? And Baltimore was on my list.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they got our guy Odafe Owe, because he doesn't want to go by Jason Owen anymore, wants to go by Odafe, I believe is the pronunciation. So that was a good one. We got Tommy saying even more physical, Steelers, Bengals. That gets a little dirty. That's not as the classic throwback, leather helmets kind of going on there with the vibe you get with the Steelers, Ravens. But coming back to Surtain, and the point with the Ravens is the Ravens have had the most stable defense in football. And in my opinion, the reason they've been able to do that and be an outlier in that regard is because of how much they have invested in that defensive backfield. Depth in the defensive backfield translates season to season, because we saw with the Broncos not just last year, 2 seasons. When you get down to your 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, specifically last year, cornerback, your defensive integrity just goes out the window. It goes flush it down the toilet. Season's over. So now the Broncos have almost not injury proofed, because you don't want your top guys to get injured. I mean, that obviously makes it worse, but they have so much depth in the defensive backfield now that I think they're building something here where not only obviously the identity of this team going forward, but also I think it could be good for multiple seasons. Now, is it going to be that number 1 DVOA defense? Probably not. That's hard to get. That being that good can fluctuate, but they're built to be pretty sustainably good. And when you can cover like that and cover space like the Broncos are now set up with the depth, you can do some things. And also I want to get out here that trope that Vic Fangio doesn't value cornerbacks. I don't know if this is the George Payton influence. It might be, but man, that goes out the window with this offseason. The Broncos went cornerback.
Yeah, defensive back all around. And like I said, with Surtain, you can move him around. There's no saying he couldn't be a free safety and a nickel. You can move him around all over the place. Just a really good, just a great football player. Like we said on Friday morning, you can be disappointed that you didn't get the guy that you were hoping to get, but you can't be disappointed in Surtain. He's a really good player, and if you were picking in the top 10, that's pretty much how it was going to go. You might not have gotten a player that you wanted, but you were getting a player that you can be excited about, and that's a good way to be.
Yeah, and I know a lot of
good draft.
It was a good draft overall. I know this is kind of cliche, but we haven't talked specifically a long period with these prospects, but everything coming back about these guys the Broncos picked, for the most part, all exceedingly high character. Also, team captains, guys that the coaches rave about. Yes, sir, no, sir. How can I win today? How can I help you win today? And extremely intelligent as well. So very, very excited about that. And Broncos country has been screaming about linebackers for years now. Ever since Al Wilson retired, they've been screaming about wanting to get a true field general kind of linebacker. Well, guys, in the year 2021, and you're looking to cover those tight ends, maybe you're thinking linebacker. I'm going to point at Surtain. I really think that he's actually going to be, especially early on, I think he's going to be your big slot eraser, and that specifically pertains to when you see guys like Darren Waller and Travis Kelce flexed out to the slot, which is pretty often. I mean, those guys function as wide receivers for those offenses. And Surtain's biggest concern for me was when he isn't allowed to get his hands on guys and has to rely on that quick twitch. It's not always there. I'm not as concerned about that against tight ends. I'm not as concerned about that as with tight ends. He's long, he's big, he's got good athleticism for his size as well, just not always the twitchiest guy. Worried about that on the boundary. He's not like that Jair Alexander type of cornerback that'd be perfect in the boundary in the scheme. But with his length, with his smarts, I think we got ourselves a tight end eraser that people have been screaming about for years, just not in the way that they pictured it. They being the fans. I mean, we saw him against Kyle Pitts, and Kyle Pitts had an okay game, but Surtain was with him. So obviously that's a great build here. And I want to get also to the Broncos' second-round pick because I saw some comments about that as well. We're really excited about that. Javonte Williams, running back from the University of North Carolina, one of the youngest players in this class, 4.6 grade point average valedictorian from his high school, only 400 touches in college as well, compared to like 700 for both Travis Etienne and Najee Harris. I'm excited. I didn't think I'd be this excited about a running back, especially trading up for a running back. But man, Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, giddy up.
Well, and you mentioned when we were talking about him, he led the nation, I believe, in yards after contact.
Yep.
And I've said this thing. I use this phrase a lot just because you can make me sound like an idiot if you take this out of context. But speed is overrated. You know, when you're talking about the running back position, give me a 4.6 guy with balance and power over the 4.4 guy who can't break a tackle. And Javonte Williams, when you're leading that 1 yards after contact, you can break a tackle. And that's going to play so much better on the next level that you had me at that. It's like you had me at yards after contact. You had me. I'm good.
Yep.
But talking about earlier on here, just a little bit up the line a little bit, there was a question on there that says, is it too soon? Is it too soon to take, I guess I'm old school enough to think that running backs are still important. Taking a running back too early is a waste. If you were to say I can get you 6,500 yards out of the next 5 years, then we're going to be done with this guy. Is that worth a second round pick? Hell yes, it's worth a second round pick. So having that guy, it's like, oh well, they're overvalued. You can get value, but if you don't have a running back, you dang sure know it. So if you're missing one, it. They might be easier to find, but not always. There's no guarantee I can go to the scrap heap and go get a guy that's going to get me 4.5 to 5 yards of carry and catch the ball out of the backfield and make the blocks that I need. So if you can take them that early, if you can get them in the second round, it's absolutely worth it. Even if you only get 5 years out of the guy, so what?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're absolutely right.
You needed a running back, great pick.
And I also I've said it multiple times in this class or draft philosophy in general, I don't really love the value of a round one running back because I feel like you're kind of just incinerating that fifth year option where you can get more value at a harder to find position, especially one that's more developmental based, like an offensive tackle. Years 1 and 2, you got to know for the most part, that guy's going to be hopefully an average starter, but you're thinking about years 3 and 4. I like to have that fifth year of control for an offensive tackle, cornerback, edge rusher, quarterback. But for running back, early round 2, that I'm fine with that. And it's really with the understanding, though, that you're using this guy up over that 4-year contract, and you're probably letting him walk. I know it's unfair. Mamas, if you're listening out there, don't let your sons play running back because it's a cruel position. They're not going to have as long of an earning window, but that's my philosophy on it. And you can blame Mike Shanahan for that one. But I'm excited about Williams. And he, honestly, I went back and watched a lot of these guys. Surtain reminded me a little bit of Charles Tillman with the length and the ball skills and the smarts. Not always the best, the most explosive athlete, but man, savvy as heck. Quick feet, too, for being so big. Javonte Williams, I got a lot more, the more I watched him, Kareem Hunt, because he is so natural with the hands. He's got great balance. He's not going to break many 80-yard runs, but man, he is a bowling ball. And I was really, really surprised how just natural in space he was with his hands. And the best pass blocking back in this class. That dude blocks like it's his job, and it's beautiful to watch.
Well, and if you're mentioning a pick where you're taking a risk on a developmental position, that's not the case with a running back. You know what you're getting. When we start talking about, should these guys be able to come out earlier? And I think, it's restrictive trade and all this kind of stuff where you're not allowed to go get a job. That's a different conversation. I think it's horse. I don't like it.
Yeah.
They should be able to come out whenever they want to, just like MLB. Every draft should be handled like Major League Baseball draft. But you know what you're getting. You might not know what you're getting with an offensive lineman. It's a much harder position to evaluate once you get past the freaks of nature up at the top end of the draft. Even sometimes those guys fail. But I think it's a much safer pick when you're talking about where I want to be at the running back position over the next 2 years, as opposed to going with an offensive tackle. So you might need to get another one in 5 years. You're not making a 12-year investment, but the second round guy, I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, absolutely. And specifically now we can put the running back round 1 talk to bed next season. And that makes me the most happy. We can just completely punt on that. We're good. Javonte Williams is here. And I'm really excited to see what him and Melvin Gordon can do this season. They're not going to be Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt level, but that could be one of the better running back duos in football this year, as long as the offensive line, specifically the interior, does a little bit better job blocking inside. So I want to get to this comment right here. Good morning over in Israel. I think we could have drafted a guy like Jenkins or Grant. It does sound like Tevin Jenkins had a hip injury that caused him to fall a little bit. So that's probably the reason that he fell there. But man, I really love the Bears getting Justin Fields and Tevin Jenkins, 2 of my favorite players in this class. I probably would have gone with Tevin Jenkins there, but it's fine. It's a good process. I want you to talk a little bit, and we actually kind of willed it to happen there. We talked about it on the was it the Friday show, the Thursday show, about the Broncos and the Falcons both looking at safety, and Richie Grant specifically in the second round, and he ends up being the guy actually picked at pick 40. And goes off the board to the Atlanta Falcons. So congrats, good player. I'm excited for you.
Falcons and Broncos are dealing. It was like me and Nick were running the war room here.
We don't have any Tyson Reynolds to trade you.
I wrote earlier that day that there were like 7 players that the Falcons could look at with that 35 spot, and all 7 were still available when they were at 35. Well, that's a pretty good time to move down 5 spots then, because you're going to get 2 of them that are still going to be available. And Richie Grant is just, you look him up and it says football player next to his name. I mean, he's got instincts, he's got passion, he's got skills. With Merrick being a doubt, I thought Richie Grant was the top safety in this class, and even with Merrick, I think it was close. So the Falcons had to have a safety. They have a journeyman special teams guy, and then a journeyman guy who started some for the Lions last year. So that was a good move for the Falcons to come back and get another 4th round pick out of it. Yeah, and giving up, I think, a 5th next year that we can talk about. But I'm a huge fan of Richie Grant. He was the guy I put on the board for the Falcons at safety in the 2nd round in January. So
absolutely.
So yeah, depending on what you needed, did you need a running back more, or did you need a safety more, knowing what was still on the board? There were I don't think safety was as deep as the running back position, but it depends on how high you had Javonte Williams.
Yeah. And like I said, he was my tier. He was I like to do big boards based on tiers. So you kind of get guys in range, and Javonte Williams was in my tier 1 for the running backs. And ETN, I didn't think fit as well for this offense. So honestly, he was right there with Najee Harris, but is younger. I would say a little bit more explosive and younger with more tread on the tires. So he honestly, talking into it, like you could say, well, you can make an easy argument for him being running back 1. He was the last one on the board, and they went up and got him. So it's a piece that they like to feature in this offense. And the Broncos now can use a little bit more 5 wides out there. They don't have to keep in the tight ends to chip, et cetera, because Javonte Williams is such a good pass blocker, and you're going to need that in this offensive scheme. So I'm excited about that. We got Drake Foss coming in here asking about the Broncos' last 3rd round pick, the last pick of day 2 here. Do you think we'll regret taking Browning over Cox, especially his experience in coverage? Well, Drake, I think that I'm going to go with no here, because I absolutely love Baron Browning, and this might make some people's hair pull out, but I think there's an equal chance, if not better, that you're actually talking about Baron Browning as a Von Miller replacement more so than a Josie Jewell or an Alexander Johnson. Right now, that sounds like they're going to try him at off-ball first, that stack linebacker position, but Vic Fangio said that they're going to let him figure out where he fits best. So you're going to kind of see him moved around this season, but Browning, he's really long for the position. I think he's got like 33-inch arm length. He's super explosive. You could probably he's got a big frame still too, so you could probably put on another 5-10 pounds, still be explosive. And I'm really intrigued with him as a Sam linebacker, like a stand-up edge rusher option in this defense going forward. But we'll see. Regretting Cox over Browning, or Browning over Cox, though, not for me, especially because the Broncos already have a guy like Cox on their roster, a limited athlete that is fluid in coverage in Justin Strnad. So, and also Cox had a medical flag. So that's another reason he fell.
And the Baron Browning is definitely more of a go forward guy, without a
Yes.
doubt. And that's what Nick is saying. So it's a different skill set for sure with Cox and coverage. Now, you just backed the guy that goes forward with about 5 defensive backs in this draft. So maybe you needed the guy that goes forward, but 6'3 plus, 240 plus, 6'7", 8 Elcone is elite, and a 10'10" broad jump. He's explosive.
Yes, he is.
And I've got a link I sent. I'll talk so Nick can pick it up. Where in the Senior Bowl, where he's rushing the passer, and Ben Mason, who was drafted in the 5th, it's like the only fullback taken from Michigan, Ohio State and Michigan coming head to head, tries to step up and get him, and Baron Browning just rocked his world. So he is a go forward guy. Now, when I started, I did the same thing with Quinn in that pick. I'm like, who are the 2 guys that I might have thought would be good fits in this spot if they didn't take Browning? And Cox was one. He was the first guy. And the other one was Ellerson Smith, the defensive end from Northern Iowa, who's 6'6.5" with a 41-inch vertical, had 20.5 sacks in 2019. Love the guy. And I think that's so those are 2 guys that you can watch. But I have no problem whatsoever with the Baron Browning with the Baron Browning pick right here. And like I said, he's definitely a go forward type of guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, the length you talk about, he's longer than there's a lot of similarities between him and I would say Micah Parsons. Honestly, I really would say that. I think Micah Parsons is a little bit more explosive coming downhill, has a little bit more natural power. But
he's a little better in space is the difference there. Is Micah Parsons is a little bit better in space, a little bit better laterally, sideline to sideline, but Baron Browning going forward is really good.
Yeah. And one of my favorite football analysts out there who specifically for the edge rushers, he does a phenomenal job with edge rushers, is John Ledyard. He's been with the Draft Network, and now he's over at the Pewter Report. And he said that if the Ohio State Buckeyes played Baron Browning primarily at edge, that Baron Browning would have had an argument for edge 2 in this class. So I'm just saying, hopefully it's not he's stuck in no man land like what happened with Justin Hollins for the Broncos, but I think there really is a pathway for Baron Browning to be a spectacular edge rusher, specifically in this defense.
And there's no substitution for video. So let me show the play I was telling you about here.
And I dropped it in the chat.
Okay.
Yep.
The play Baron Browning is lined up on the right side here at the Senior Bowl. And over here I haven't shared my screen yet, have I? Can y'all see my screen?
I can. Here we go.
Okay.
There we go. Boom, boom.
Baron Browning is lined up over here on the right edge. And this is Ben Mason at fullback. And this is Ohio State, Michigan going head to head here. And one step, he's in the backfield as Mason tries to step up.
Oh, you'd love to see it.
That's what we might call sealing the edge. And, when we talk about other guys in this draft specifically, he's bigger than Jonathan Cooper. So to back your point about saying where might they be, if he had been an edge, he's actually bigger than Jonathan Cooper. And Jonathan Cooper fell a little bit because he's not as athletic as the guy that's playing linebacker. So, I'm a big fan of the pick. I like it. Like I said, 2 guys to watch. Obviously, y'all mentioned one of them, Jabril Cox, and what he ends up doing. But I don't think his skill set translates to as a sure thing as Baron Browning. And then Ellerson Smith. I just love Ellerson Smith. I think he's going to be a steal. I think he fell into the 4th, and he's a steal. And I think the Giants got him. So keep an eye out for him. I like those guys. I mean, 21 tackles for 21 sacks with that athleticism at 6'6.5" and a 270 pounds and a 40-inch vert. I'm like, hell, draft him in the 4th just to let him block kicks, for goodness sakes. So,
man, you do love yourself some UNI Panthers, some Spencer Brown.
When they're like that, Jesus, are you kidding me? I like
absolutely.
guys that are 6'6.5", 270 that can jump through the roof. Yeah, and have production on top of it. It's not just. It's not just combine warriors.
100%.
These guys got it done on the football field. So yeah, I like them.
No, yeah, absolutely. That's a good call. And make sure you guys follow Scott on Twitter. I actually want to talk a little bit more Quinn Miners as well, because I know you have that video over on YouTube as well. I'll drop that in the chat here real quick. But yeah, Quinn Miners, it is interesting to me that the Broncos did end up taking another interior offensive lineman. It was one position that I felt very confident that this Broncos team is pretty good this season. Obviously, they have all their starters returning back. Pretty high investments: Dalton Reisner, Lloyd Cushenberry, Graham Glasgow, and you had that lottery ticket in Natane Muti. But now they're bringing in Quinn Miners. It will be really interesting. But you saw him down at the Senior Bowl as well. I think I heard at the Senior Bowl was the first time he ever even took snaps as a center because he was such a long time guard. But man, rocking that crop top, a lot of fun, a lot of energy. The Broncos struggled last year to create movement at the point of attack in the run game. Maybe Miners is going to be a year off just because that is a big jump in competition. He has athleticism, but it's a big jump still, especially from the technique, mental side if he is going to play center. But if you're looking for somebody to bring some tenacity, some people movement skills at the center position, some length, some girth as well, man, I think he could be really good. So talk to me about that, what you saw about Quinn Miners down at the Senior Bowl and that clip that I shared here too on over on YouTube.
Well, when you're watching him and you see that, the smaller school, and you wondering how's he going to react when some of these guys who've been playing at the higher level. Now, there's a little bit of chicken or the egg thing because a lot of the guys that are playing in the Senior Bowl are there because they weren't good enough to come out as juniors. Now, that's not necessarily the case in the trenches where it's a grown man's game. The extra year certainly makes them better. For sure. So in the trenches, the extra year, you see more good seniors in the trenches than you do at the skill positions, because skill position guys, they're born and they don't need as much time to develop, and they're coming out as juniors. So, but when I see him going up against the Marvin Wilsons of the world, Jonathan Cooper, Dalen Hayes, these guys from these big schools, he handled them, and not just with pure power, but he was able to use his hands and move laterally. And that taking snaps at center and being able to get that off and get your head up and find the guy, he was good. He was very good. I didn't think there was that big of a difference between him and the two Notre Dame guys, Aaron Banks and Robert Hansey, that I didn't think there was much between them, or Creed Humphrey for that matter, the big kid from Oklahoma who played a bunch of different ways. So, like I said at the beginning, there was a lot of good interior line. And is this an unpolished gem? How much has he been pushed, and the strength and conditioning and everything that you might get, and the nutrition that you might get at a bigger program, that he might have even more upside than what you see, which isn't necessarily the case for a 320-pound guy that's 6'3", that's already super strong. So good pick all along.
Yeah, and we got Quinn's gut is better than every wannabe alpha male with a six-pack. So what's better than a six-pack? Full-on keg. Anybody been to a frat party, you'd know that. But he's a mauler. I'm really excited to see him, and I really hope it's been a trend in the Broncos locker room for a long time that the offensive line does not talk to the media. If they keep Miners behind the curtain without letting him kind of show off his personality, I'm going to be very upset, because he seems like a lot of fun, and I want that personality to come out. I get it. Mean boys, they're out there, the media, they don't have time for that. They're not the prima donnas, but I want to see Miners out there having a good time. So do want to focus this real quickly. We talked about the Broncos top 100 picks here, but day 3, I just run through some of these names, and if you have any thoughts on any of these guys specifically, because obviously once you get outside of the top 150, you don't have time to watch every single guy in depth. But we got Caden Stearns, former high recruit from Texas, going to the Broncos at pick 152. We got Jamar Johnson, pick 164, safety out of Indiana. We got Seth Williams, pretty high recruit at wide receiver from Auburn, going 219. Kerry Vincent Jr. talked a little bit about him, nickelback at pick 237 out of LSU. Jonathan Cooper, edge rusher from Ohio State, 239. And then Marquise Spencer, defensive end, probably going to be converted to defensive tackle, I would assume, in this scheme, 5 technique, 3 technique, 4-eye, etc. At the pick 253 from Mississippi State. So any thoughts there about some of those guys? I know you had some thoughts on Cooper, but I mean, obviously you've seen Caden Stearns, Jamar Johnson, and the like as well.
Yeah, real quick on Jamar Johnson, Indiana. It was 4 interceptions, 8 games. Good athleticism stuff, nice size. One of the notes on him is he was thrown out for punching a Michigan player. Is that a knock? How many fans out there that aren't Michigan fans would be cheering on? Yes,
do it.
So I as long as that's not a pattern of discipline problems, then I would think then I don't think that's necessarily a knock. I just thought that was kind of a funny note. But the one guy I really want to hit on, because I went to Auburn, so I watched Seth Williams a lot. And Seth Williams is ended up being real high on Auburn's receiving list. And there's some pretty good receivers come out of Auburn. Not Hall of Fame type guys, but Frank Sanders was really good. And in the college level, there's some really good players. And he ended up pretty high, but he was always the guy that you just felt like either wasn't being utilized or wasn't putting forth the effort, or it's just he was a tease. He's 6'3", 215 pounds, 3 game-winning touchdown catches, so he's a big player. And it just always felt like you were almost about to have the Seth Williams breakthrough, where he's just a Julio Jones type. That's the type of frame he has. And having a play with a 5-star true freshman quarterback doesn't help. He's not going there with Bo Nix coming in. So Seth Williams, if he turns it on, if he becomes a professional, he's a first-round guy.
Wow.
So that is a low-risk, high-reward pick that if he becomes a professional, you're looking at Demaryius Thomas. I mean, it's my knock watching Demaryius Thomas. I'm like, why is he playing cornerback and AA ball at West Dublin's high school? Because Demaryius Thomas was soft. He was soft. He gets to the next level and he turns into a grown man. He's like, oh, wait, I am 6'4", 225 pounds. I can beat these guys up. And if Seth Williams can make that leap mentally, emotionally, professionally, you've got a player. Flat out got a player. Or he's going to go there and get his ass kicked and he's going to be gone in a year. So, but it is a low risk, high reward type of player, which in the 7th round, 6th round, that's a hell of a pick. What do you have to lose compared to what you have to gain? So we're rooting for him because he's got a lot of potential. Great body control, hands, catch radius, all those catchphrases you've got, no pun intended. All those buzzwords you use around him, big play player, 6'3", 215 pounds. Yeah, he can be a dude for sure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed his tape. You touched on it. Like, he's big. He doesn't always play big, though. So you hope that he gets that. Also, for his frame, you think he could actually he looks a little skinny. Like, he could hit the weight room a little harder and put on a little bit more mass. And you'd hope he wouldn't lose much explosiveness. But this is a pick for the future, right? The Broncos have two X receivers, and you guys listening, you guys know that we've harped on it. Wide receiver isn't just wide receiver. You got your X, you got your Z, you got your slot. Seth Williams is an X receiver, and the way the Broncos roster is constructed right now, you have 2 X receivers who are on their contract year, in Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton. And odds are one of those guys is going to be out the door. It'll probably be Tim Patrick because Cortland Sutton is a phenom, and you don't want to let fantastic players walk. And that's no disrespect to Tim Patrick. He's a very good player. He just is not as good as Cortland Sutton is. So you're looking for a cheap guy that you can develop to be a backup X receiver on this roster. And I think that's what you envision with Seth Williams. That's a great value with the sixth round pick. So you want him to perform a little better. You want him to develop, but that's why you have Zach Azzani, who's one of the best wide receiver coaches in the game. I'm really excited about this pick. I think Dane Brugler had him rated as a 4th rounder. I think Pro Football Focus had him rated as a late 4th rounder. Getting him at the end of the 6th, that's great. That you can find wide receivers in the draft, maybe not ones, but he can become a really good depth piece. So I'm excited about him.
I will bet you if you go back and find one of those way too early mock drafts somewhere on the internet, in the world of the internet, like 3 years ago, Seth Williams is listed as a 1st round pick. I would bet I could find that somewhere from someone. Of course, you can say that for just about everybody.
Yeah, true.
But Seth Williams is a day 1, day 2 NFL talent. Now, can he put it all together? And that's, again, we talk about how you do your evaluations. If you slide down the list for one reason or another, it's like, wait a minute, this guy had good numbers. He's got great measurables. How come he slid? That's why. Because, and frankly, I think he got a little frustrated at Auburn at times. And just like Auburn fans have been a little frustrated the last couple of years. That's why they got a new coach. That was one reason why they have a new coach in. They're playing with a true freshman quarterback who's the son of a former player, 5 stars next to his name. and they struggled a little bit. That offense was always better with a running quarterback. You know, they went to the national championship with a guy at quarterback that ended up getting drafted as a defensive back, and Nick Marshall. He got drafted as a DB by, I think, the Jaguars. Played in the national championship game with him. You know, Cam Newton didn't throw a pass until about the fourth game of the year. The year they won the championship, that was still a Gus Malzahn offense. And Seth Williams might have been the best receiver out of all this bunch, but again, I've said what I have to say about him. We can move on. He can be a really good player for you, but he's got to want it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Scott, we're winding down here, about 5 minutes left before we got to get on out of here. Thank you guys, everyone, join us in the chat today. I want you to have a second here to talk about the Falcons draft, obviously. It's not just, it is Broncos for breakfast here, but the Falcons are your team. Obviously, you had been hoping for a Justin Fields at 4. I had been hoping for a Justin Fields at 9. You know, we're both probably going to talk ourselves into whoever they took, but overall thoughts on the Falcons draft and how it played out for you. I'm excited about the Richie Grant pick as well. You guys have needed safety for a bit, and one that can do stuff, wearing a lot of different hats, moving backwards, not that classic Keanu Neal, who, guess what, guys, another Cowboys linebacker. They're all linebacker defense there for the Dallas Cowboys this year.
Well, before we get there, when we talk about his replacement, I was real high on Hamza Nasruddin as a replacement, very similar skill set to Keanu Neal. I think the Jets took him and just put him at linebacker.
Yep.
There you go. I mean, it makes sense with coverage skills. When we were talking about guys that you can go in and drop on that tight end, Hamza Nasruddin was my guy for that. And I think the Jets took him, and I was like, where'd he end up? And he ended. It's like, oh yeah, and they've already moved him to LB. Makes sense. I was disappointed with the Kyle Pitts pick, again, for a lot of the same reasons. I can say the same thing and just change the names for the Broncos, and we're saying the same thing. I wasn't disappointed because Kyle Pitts is a hell of a prospect. I just didn't think, and part of it has to do is, where do you think this team is? You know, if you think this team is ready to compete for a playoff spot and actually make a run in the playoffs, then Kyle Pitts is okay. He could be an impact guy.
Yeah.
If you think they can block, run, tackle. I don't. You know, I'm looking at a 4-12 team with a 36-year-old quarterback, thinking, well, quarterback's not a need. The hell it's not. You're 4-12 with a 36-year-old quarterback. It's a big need. So I was ready to throw in the towel, you know, basically, and say, okay, let's start the rebuild now. Your best players are 36, 32, and Julio Jones. They missed their window. Let's rebuild now. So I honestly wanted the Falcons to drop back. Best case scenario was they trade back. If they had gotten the 49ers deal, holy cow, I would have bitten your hand off for that. For 3 first-round picks for a team that's 4-12 and needs to rebuild, absolutely. But then you're like, okay, let's look at the draft as a whole. And you say, you know, Richie Grant at safety, yeah, oh yeah, I like that pick. I'm like, we're coming out of this with, you know, the Falcons coming out of this with Kyle Pitts and Richie Grant. All right. What does Arthur Smith like to do? He likes to line up 2 tight ends and beat the hell out of you. All right, Jalen Mayfield is an offensive tackle. The knock on him was he's not so good laterally in pass pro. Well, okay, well, let's put a tight end next to him and let him beat up the guy in front of him. So really like that. So, you know, coming out of the first 2 days, it makes me feel better. And if Julio Jones is on the move, you got a ready-made replacement. At least you're not going backwards. But, you know, you're going to have to depend on schemes to immediately improve the offense, because there's only one football to go around. You know, like you kind of look at the Moneyball philosophy for baseball. It's like, I don't have to replace this one guy. It's like, well, who was Austin Hooper and Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, the last time all 3 of those were healthy was 2019. They went for like 3,000 yards, 225 catches, 3,000 yards, and 20 touchdowns. How much better does that get when you trade out Austin Hooper and Kyle Pitts? Does it really get better? Does it, or are you staying pat, or does it even get worse because your offensive line is worse and your running game's worse? So that's what I thought on it, but I don't want to take up too much time with Falcon stuff. But you can get into the philosophy of how are you going to improve your team, and going for needs and best player available nonsense, you know, because best player available is relative. You know, I think I always thought Penei Sewell was a best player available type at a much greater need in a premium position. He made more sense to me at 4 if you were going to stay there. And Justin Fields sure as hell made more sense at 4 if you were going to stay there.
Yeah, nope, absolutely. Man, my voice is gone after talking so much this week covering the draft. But guys, that's going to do it for us today. We're going to get on out of here. Want to give a shout out to Bobby for dropping that very kind super early on, and shout out to everybody else in the chat providing a lot of good comments and dictating where Scott and I go. You guys can find Scott on Twitter at Scout Kennedy. You can find myself on Twitter at Nick Kendell MHH. Guys, this is Broncos for Breakfast. We'll be back. I think we'll be back tomorrow morning. Maybe talk some other AFC West drafts here, kind of breaking down here, laughing a little bit at the Raiders, telling the Chargers, unfortunately, they did a good job. And the Chiefs, you can say what you will about them, but they're kind of what the Broncos did this last year for defensive backs. Chiefs did with the offensive line, completely revamped it. Room looks entirely different because they saw they had a problem and they attacked it. So, I don't like them, but I got to respect the decisions there and the direction they went. You can follow us also at Mile High Huddle. So, guys, we'll be back tomorrow. We appreciate everybody, and make sure you find Scott's YouTube page as well. Go ahead and subscribe on there, youtube.com/C/Scott Kennedy. He is dropping down all that content there. He has content from the Senior Bowl as well. You saw him talk about the Baron Browning one there. He also has some Quinn Miners tape out there. So, it's going to be exciting. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Scott, what do you have going on the rest of the day on this fine Monday?
Well, I don't know how much of this is coming through, but it's pitch black outside of my window. It looks like midnight out there. So if you do weather.com and type in 30022, that's where I live. It's a little scary outside right now. So I don't know what I'm going to do the rest of the day except catch up on lots of draft stuff. Get ready to talk Chargers. I did some work on the rest of the AFC West, and I agree with you. I think the Chargers had a really good draft. So we can break that down a little bit. And then, as always, we're going to take your questions. What do y'all want to know? I love the Q&A format. It helps us with making sure we're talking about what you want to hear about rather than, just follow the yellow brick road, Jeremy. Yeah, the yellow brick road for me leads right down in the Chattahoochee River, so it might wash me away. But the Q&A helps us make sure that we're talking about what you want to hear about instead of what we want to talk about. A lot of times it's the same thing, but I love the Q&A.
Yeah, and everybody hit that like on the way out. Make sure you also subscribe, like, and share over on YouTube. We will see you guys tomorrow. Hopefully my voice is a little bit back by then. Gonna gargle some salt water or something, I guess, before we get there. So we'll see you guys later. Have a good Monday, and go Broncos.